This is the fifth lesson about the transforming system. And the title of tonight's lesson is Getting the Imagination Captured. The greatest thing that ever happened in my life occurred a number of years ago. In a moment, in a flash, I had a spiritual experience that was very real, tangible. It was both subjective and objective to me. It was a moment in which everything that made up the life of Jack Boland changed. My entire belief system was either changed at that moment or was in process. It was set in motion. There was no part of me that was left untouched. The thing that was so absolutely priceless was that God, who was unknown to me a moment before, became real, tangible, alive, personal. There was communication in both directions. And of the things that were made known to me, one thing stood out above all the others, and it was that I had been given, and so have you, the ability, the capacity to change my life, to be transformed. That we are spiritual beings living in a spiritual universe, and we're not the victim of circumstances at all. We never were. We create our own circumstances. You can only be the victim of the circumstances that you yourself have created. It was shown to me that my mind is a powerful, God-created instrument that can do the most incredible things. As a matter of fact, it had been doing some very incredible things. I had created an incredible mess with my life, using my mind to do it. And it was so exciting to me, I cannot tell you how exciting. But I saw that this imaging faculty of the mind, the imagination, the creative imagination, was far more than I had ever believed it to be, or have yet conceived it to be after working with it for, these many years. So with all of the earnestness at my command, I ask you to hear what I'm saying to you tonight. Think about it. To practice using whatever part of this concept that comes to you, so that you too will be astonished as I will. For the reasons that I've just told you, probably my favorite quotation is by Rufus Jones, who was a Quaker mystic, one who understood the deeper meaning of spiritual things. Jones said, getting your imagination captured is almost the whole of life. The minute the eyes of your heart are enlightened, the minute that your heart, your feeling nature, conceives something in a new light, the minute your imagination gives you the picture of your path, your goal, your aim, it is as good as done. The way to become the architect of your faith, the captain of your soul, is to have your imagination captured. Now notice that Rufus Jones did not say that we don't have an imagination, a creative imagination. He was implying that we all do, because we do. And we've been using our imagination from the beginning of our existence. It is impossible to not use it. The problem is that we don't know that we have it. We're not in charge. Our imagination has been captured not by us, but by circumstances, by conditions usually the negative conditions in our lives. In his great book, Psycho-Cybernetics, Dr. Maxwell Maltz made a major contribution to modern thinking when he told us that the human mind proved, at least to my satisfaction, is a goal-setting and goal-achieving mechanism. He also talked about the power of our creative imagination. And he pointed out that successful men and women have, since the beginning of time, used mental pictures, he called them, and rehearsal practice to achieve success. And one of the examples that he used was that of Napoleon, that from the time of Napoleon's childhood, he had pictured himself being the leader of an army. And here is this person of very small stature who did not have the redeeming features of a military leader. He became one through believing that he was one. And as a matter of fact, he finally did himself in through the negative use of the very faculty that brought him into power. Conrad Hilton imagined himself operating a hotel long before he ever bought one. As a small boy, he used to play that he was a hotel operator. There was something fascinating about hotels to him, and he ended up with a whole bunch of them simply by believing it, seeing it in advance. Dr. Charles Garfield, who was a part of the Apollo 11 mission, pointed out here on this platform in a seminar that he gave just about a year ago, the power of the collective mind of a group of like-minded persons coming together with a sense of mission. Remember when he told us? And his book, Peak Performers, was introduced to the public right here on this platform. In his book, Garfield points out in chapter 5, which is entitled Self-Management Through Self-Mastery, and one of the cutting points of his revelation of how peak performers work is that, without exception, a peak performer is a person who has come to understand, either intuitively or through conscious development, the power of his or her mind to create. And so they practice mental rehearsal, seeing it first in the mind's eye. Whatever it is that they wish to be, to have, to do, or to achieve, they mentally rehearse long before they're able to accomplish the feats that mark their greatness. All peak performers accomplish mentally what they will ultimately achieve actually. All of them. So if you and I wish to go beyond where we are, to reach beyond our present stature, we must come to understand the power of our creative imagination. Yet, I dare say that in your educational process, you were not taught that you even had a creative imagination. In what grade in school were you taught? Grade school? High school? College? Where? Nowhere. Nowhere. In what part of your religious training was it revealed to you that you were a spiritual being with a God-given power of imagination with which you could form and shape your world in the manner of your own choice, working with a power or a force that was greater than yourself? And yet, it's one of the strangest facts that from Genesis to Revelation, the Old Testament and the New convey to us time and time again how the mystics and the prophets of old, that those persons who stood out in that day, those peak performers, also understood and practiced the use of creative visualization. They saw what they wanted to have happened. They stopped seeing what they did not want to see. And they visualized a force greater than themselves doing for them what they could not do for themselves. They actually visualized God and his mighty power going before them to make the crooked way straight. Chapter after chapter of the Bible is nothing more than the depiction of human beings rising above their normalcy by believing and imagining that which had not yet occurred, and by even imagining that God was working with them and through them, and as a result of the use of their creative imagination, experiencing literally what they had imagined. It came to pass. Environment was their looking glass. Remember a few years ago when Jesus Christ, Superstar, was being shown? I saw it several times. Loved it. Great movie. And perhaps my favorite scene was when he went into the temple. Now, we've been told that he went into the temple angry, and he was turning over the tables of the money changers and the people who were selling doves for sacrifice in the temple because he was upset. It's not true. That was a metaphor for Jesus, or for the Christ in us, going into the temple, which is our own mind, and overturning the self-imposed limiting concepts that have sold us short, and those things that we sacrifice our lives for that have no meaning. And in the movie, though, he went into the temple and he was turning over the tables, and there were some dancers dancing around, and one of the dancers, who was somewhat risque, said to him, "What you see is what you get." And it's true. What you see in your life is what you get. What you visualize is what you are experiencing. The image, your own self-image, is what you experience, nothing more and nothing less. Nor shall it ever be. But with your creative imagination, you have been given the power to change what you believe to be the truth about yourself, because it is not the truth at all. You've been empowered to believe new things and therefore to have a new experience. What we see is really what we get in this life. Dr. Leslie Weatherhead, a prominent theologian and metaphysician from a recent generation, said, "If we have in our minds a picture of ourselves as fear-haunted and defeated nobodies, we must get rid of that picture at once and hold up our heads. That is a false picture, and the false must go." This is what Jesus was pointing out when he went into the temple and was turning over those tables that represented false concepts. God sees us as men and women in whom and through whom he can do a great work. He sees us as already serene, confident, and cheerful, not as pathetic victims of life, but masters of the art of living. Full, not of self-concern, but of love and laughter and a desire to serve. And it's so important that you and I begin to see ourselves in a new way and to stop seeing ourselves as we have believed ourselves to be. In Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, which was written after 20 years studying the secrets of success of 500 of the most successful men and women of his time. He was looking for the common denominators in those persons. What are the things in successful people that make them successful? It had never been studied before, not in modern times. And as a result of that, this book was published in 1937. Would you believe that almost 50 years later, 49 years later, this book is still number 7 today, this month, in the list of motivational and inspirational books that have been sold? Why? Because its principles withstand all time. They are the timeless principles of the universe that are applicable to every person. And Napoleon Hill had, as one of his important chapters, one that he called Imagination, the workshop of the mind. He said the imagination is literally the workshop wherein are fashioned all plans created by man the impulse, the desire, those dreams, those desires, the hopes that you have can never be realized until we turn them over to our creative imagination so that they will be given shape and form, and then ultimately action through this powerful, all-powerful creative faculty. But the mind of man can conceive, can visualize, and believe, can feel. It can achieve, and not only can it achieve, it will achieve it. There is no other choice. What we conceive and believe, we will experience, be it good or ill. We think in secret, but it comes to pass. And our only limitations within reason lies in the development and use of our imagination. The development and use. All of us have our creative imagination, but we have not developed it. We have not become disciplined in the use of it at all. As a matter of fact, as a race, we have merely discovered that we have an imagination, and our use of it is elementary. Watson, to say the least. We just hardly use it at all, constructively or creatively. Do we use it? You bet we do. Do we ever use it? Wow. All day long, every day. Every day. It's so easy to use it negatively, seeing what we don't wish to have happen. Seeing ourselves in the accident. Have you not visualized yourself being in some horrible accident simply because you saw one on the side of the road? Well, pick your own most recent example of how your imagination has just run riot, controlled by circumstances or conditions. How recent has it been since you were thinking about what he or she said to you that they should not have said to you? And you imagine all of the dire things. And remember the conversation that you had? Not with the person, but in your own head, what you were going to say to them the next time, and all of the feelings that went with it. Well, we have not yet conceived of the fact that this is a force. This is a spiritual force. This is a power that will destroy or reap a great harvest of good. I've been talking about imagination. Let me define it to you. Let Mr. Webster define it for us. Imagination is the act or power of forming mental images of what is not actually present. Simple enough. Oh, yes, you, I, and see I can see my living room right now, and I can stand in that living room and look out over Lake St. Clair from the 18th floor of our apartment. I can see the sun, the most recent sunrise that I saw. Can you see some things that are not actually here? And you say, well, that's just my memory. Well, it's more than your memory. If you will look carefully, you will see that you can actually see in your mind pictures. Some of you ladies are so good at it, you can tell me what another woman wore yesterday. The color of it, of her blouse, of her dress, can't you see it in your mind right now? And you'll even describe her earrings, and I didn't even know that she was wearing any. And you'll say, oh, yes, and there were those little, and you'll describe them accurately, won't you? That dress is home in her closet, but not so. It's in your mind. You can see it in your mind. It is there in your mind. And you say, well, that's nothing. That's only my imagination. Only my imagination? Wow. The power or act of creating mental images of what has never been actually experienced. Do you know that you can go beyond what I just said to you? You can create in your mind and see yourself playing roles, having experiences that you've never experienced before. When I was a small child, had just learned to read, my life was so unsatisfactory. I mean, the world in which I lived was so unsatisfactory that I spent long hours escaping into books and did so for many years. And I imagined myself, I had been in every part of this continent before I was 12 years old. There was no place that I had not been, and I was there in my mind. It was real to me. But later on, I just thought that I was fantasizing. The power of creating new images or ideas by combining previous experiences. It's creative power. Now, suppose that you came to know that your creative imagination could not only visualize something that you have not yet experienced, but if you held true to that picture, if you captured your imagination and held on to that imagination and reaffirmed that imagination, in time, the picture that you have of that which you have not yet experienced would become your experience. Would you dare to believe that? Oh, do you see now why the Scriptures say, oh man, how fearfully and wonderfully made we are. You have the ability to draw pictures in your mind of the kind of life that you have never lived, with circumstances that you yourself have never experienced, and by believing in them now, you will come to experience them later. You know who said that and proved it? Jesus Christ. Whatsoever things that you ask for, visualize. And believe in your heart that you already have them. You have the feeling that they have already occurred to you, and that you are connected with God, and they will come to pass. In time they will come. No exception. The only exception is that we don't believe. Imagination, resourcefulness in dealing with new or unusual experiences. Have you noticed the tendency of so many of us to continue to react to the same thing in the old way over and over again? The same things frighten us. The same things disturb us. The same things anger us. As a matter of fact, with most of the people you know, you can predict with absolute accuracy how they will respond to a given situation. They think they have a choice, but you know that they do not. True? And you think you have a choice, but they know that you don't at all. They know they've got your number. They know how you will respond. But through your creative imagination, it's possible for you to clear away those old responses and to begin to react in new situations in a new, different way. It was so interesting. Last night, I, in one of the classrooms here, walked into a room. There were some very dedicated people there in the classroom, but the teacher had not yet arrived. This was a class on speaking up and speaking well. And as I stood behind some of those persons, I heard one of them say how frightened she was, and that she would never be able to stand up before the group and speak. What was that about? A picture in the mind and an affirmation. A picture, I cannot do that, and the words, seeing herself standing there with fluttering heart and speechless and palpitating heart and a tongue that would not work, right? Perfect picture of most people when they're considering being public speakers. But then a few minutes later, after the class had started, I came back in, and I believe that the teacher was leading that group in a visualization in which she was guiding them through an experience of being on the platform and feeling themselves to be adequate for the occasion and speaking in a calm and relaxed and very informative way, to see themselves doing what they had not yet done, forming new patterns, feelings, and attitudes, so that they would react in a new situation in an entirely different way than they would otherwise have done. It was so inspiring to me. You see, most of us faithfully practice negative mental pictures and hold rehearsal practice many times a day. Remember that I told you that peak performers rehearse their pictures see themselves doing and feeling the way that they wish to feel. We do this all the time. This is why we're so good at being negative. This is why we're just really great at it. We fill our minds with what already is or with what we don't want. We're so good at visualizing what we don't want to have happen. And we join or couple these familiar mental pictures with powerful negative emotions of fear, anxiety, and hopelessness. And they happen exactly that way over and over and over again. But we have the ability to correct our course. William Wordsworth wrote, "Imagination, which in truth is but another name for absolute power and clearest insight, amplitude of mind, and reason in her most exalted mind." Einstein. Imagination is more important than knowledge, for knowledge is limited, whereas imagination embraces the entire world. And more than just the earth, you see, Albert Einstein knew that it was not his own mind that developed the equations for which he became so famous. But he was connected to a mind that was greater than his own. He visualized himself as one to whom answers came. And he saw, he had the ability to conceive of the universe not as dead matter, but as a living entity, a mind being, the universe. And he was coupled to it, and anything known in the universe could be known in and through him. That's why I said the imagination is better than knowledge, because with the imagination you're connected to all knowledge, not your own, but to all the knowledge that exists anywhere. But we conceive of ourselves as being limited human beings with nothing more than our intellect to work with. Edmund Sennett said, "Nowhere is man more godlike than in the limitless scope of his imagination, which releases him from bondage to material and finite things, which releases us from bondage to our own limited concepts. And our imagination will permit us to no longer be limited, purely physical human beings, but we begin to see that we are spiritual beings, living in a spiritual universe and coupled to the powers that form that universe. So we can begin to move, as the scriptures say, from glory to glory, from our limitations to that which is beyond where we are at the moment. Nowhere are we more godlike. Why? Because the creative imaging faculty that formed the universe in the macrocosm has been perfectly reproduced in you, the microcosm. That's why you're created in the what? In the image and likeness of whom? Of God. God's own mind has been reproduced as your own mind, and that's why we're called sons and daughters of the Most High, co-creators with Christ, using the same powers that form the universe. Oh, not to overpower God, that can never be. Why do you think that Jesus said, "You're gods"? Because we're God-like, God endowed with those powers. James Fenimore Cooper, "He who lacks imagination lives but half a life." And we don't lack imagination, we just don't use it, and therefore we only live half lives, a quarter life. But when we begin to use our imagination creatively and correctly and in a sustained way, then our lives begin to come alive. S.S. Curry, imagination is the faculty which enables man to realize eternity. The ordinary conceptions of the mind cannot embrace infinity or God. And this is what Einstein said also. It is only through the imagination that we can conceive of God as being an infinite presence and power. All these things being true, the next step is how to implement, how to begin to use our creative imagination and the other powers that are resident within us. How can I, as a person, and that's what the church of today is all about, giving us the wisdom, the understanding, the principle, but also some techniques that we can use to implement the faculties that we have. And one of the most important tools, I think, that has ever been created is our Mastermind Goal Achievers Journal. Because with this book and the transforming system that is described, that is defined here, and that's what we've been talking about in a series of lessons. We have been given the tools with which we can work. And remember last week I was talking about the importance of goal setting and goal achieving. I ended that lesson without opening the Mastermind Journal to the section that gives instructions on goal setting and goal achieving. And so I'd like tonight just to take a moment to have us be aware that in the back of your journal are the instructions that point out that goals are a blueprint for the future, a roadmap to get us from where we are now to where we want to go, dreams to which structure has been added, wishes made firm by commitment. We grow to the stature of our dreams. But our dreams must be captured, our imagination must be captured, and the first movement of the capturing of our imagination is to begin to let those dreams form into little pockets or packets that we call goals. A goal is but a dream reduced to symbols called words. That's what a goal is. A dream taken out of your mind and put on paper so that it becomes tangible and real to the conceptual part of you. And in the section on goal achieving, I point out that there are 12 categories that are suggested for your dreams or for your goals. And those categories should define all of the elements of the person I want to become, the things I want to do, and the things I want to have. And among the categories are, number one, career, which would include all the desires or dreams of your chosen pursuit, your life's work, for example, establishing levels of accomplishment, advancing your career position, developing the skills needed to be effective. Financial goals, and time does not permit me to explain in detail each of the categories, but you don't need to. They're in your Goal Achievers Journal. Financial goals, number three, spiritual goals, physical goals, mental goals, family, personal relationships. Number 8, things I want to do. Remember John Goddard, who, at the age of 15, wrote out 127 goals of things he wanted to do, to be, to have the rest of his life. You see, all of us have goals of what we want to do, but they're negative goals. Right away. See, right away when we begin to look at our lives and think beyond what we are now doing in the course of a month or a year, if anything new is suggested to us, we immediately say, but I can't do that. I can't afford that. Or I don't have the time. We immediately begin to bring forth all the reasons why we cannot, and so our goals are negative goals which say, I cannot do that. That is a wonderful thing that I cannot do. Is that true? You bet it's true. Think about taking the cruise to Alaska, and immediately you know all the reasons why you can't go, right? It's a very positive negative goal, and that which I conceive of will come to pass. Look at our lives are so self-contained, and goals really force us to break out of our comfort zones, but they are nothing more than our dreams reduced into categories. Things I want to have, things I want to be, and the feelings. I must include the feelings that I want to feel. How would I feel if I felt so good I could hardly stand it? How would I feel if my life was so full of joyous things that I was so continuously happy that I could hardly bear it? Can you envision yourself that way? Have you categorized those feelings? How can you feel them if you have not felt them? They must be felt and rehearsed and practiced. Again, in Psycho-Cybernetics, Dr. Harry Emerson Fosdick is quoted, hold a picture of yourself long and steadily enough in your mind's eye, and you'll be drawn toward it, be it good or be it bad. Picture yourself vividly as defeated, and that alone will make victory impossible. Picture yourself vividly as winning, and that alone will contribute immeasurably to success. Great living starts with a picture held in your imagination of what you would like to do or to be. And, of course, it requires that once we put those pictures into goals, that we have to visualize them. You know that last night I stepped into a class, this church, And there were 24 men in that room, and you'll never guess what they were doing. Since you won't guess, I'll tell you. They were sitting around cutting out pictures like a group of children cutting out paper dolls. They were creating image pages. You see, they had set goals, and now they were creating an image book. Each of them were a book of pictures and affirmations. This happens to be an image book. And this man has put in these pages, these early pages of his image book, pictures and statements that he can look at on a daily basis and see and feel himself actually having these experiences. Now, do you think when I look at his image book that I will see the complete picturing that he does? Of course not. But I could look at his image book and change my own life simply by looking at his. The human mind is a goal-setting and goal-achieving mechanism, and what you see, what you visualize, what you imagine yourself to be, to have, and to do, believing that you have the God-given right and that you're empowered from on high and that no resources are limited to you, the dreamer that you are. You can come to see it and believe it and feel it and experience it. You will have it. Years ago, many, many years ago, when I started setting goals for myself, it came to me one day to create an image book. And I did it, and it was embarrassing to me. For some time, I did not want anyone to know that I was doing such a thing. I really would have blushed if you had seen my image book then, because it was so far beyond where I was. And yet it was not, because I came to live in its pages. I practiced every day, walking through those pages, believing that they were true. Is it not interesting that many years later, when that image book was so worn that I had to take the pictures out and replace them again and again, that there was one picture of a certain kind of automobile parked in the lawn of a very imposing, fine, old house. Living where I live on the 18th floor, looking out toward the Grosse Pointe. I lived there maybe 3 years before I ever visited the Edsel Ford estate, to discover that years before, I had cut out a picture of a Lincoln automobile. It was an advertisement, naturally, for Lincoln from the Edsel Ford estate. And the photograph was taken in front of that estate that I can now see from the window of my home. But when I put that in my image page, I lived in Virginia. Do you think that's a coincidence? I think probably not so, because I have seen stranger and far more wonderful things happen in the lives of a person who is willing to capture their imagination. In our journal, there are instructions on how to create your own image book and suggestions on how to have those pictures come alive so that you can feel yourself already in the pages and feel the experiences and the things that you wish to have and to be and to do as already accomplished. It's like Jesus said, what you believe in your heart, as already being done, it will be done for you. It's exciting. There's a section also on affirmations. Affirmations are verbal tools used to change your attitude. The image book that I showed you has affirmations. Every day of the year in your Goal Achievers Journal, there's an affirmation for the day. And there are affirmations that one puts with each of their goals. Some that I used many years ago that are still in the image book, you can use them if you like. I vividly visualize myself as the person I want to be and see myself enthusiastically achieving my goals. I look for my good and find it. I reach for my good and grasp it. I bless my good and expect it. I have complete faith and trust in infinite intelligence, and I know that I am being guided and assisted in achieving my goals. I like people and people like me. The warmth and friendship I radiate to everyone comes back to me in the most unexpected ways. In any adversity, I recognize no failure, no defeat. I look instead for the seed of an equivalent benefit, and I fight on persistently toward my goal, thankful for the lessons I have learned. I take charge of my thoughts and feelings at all times. I have an alert, positive mental attitude and persistently think and act in the direction of my own good and goals. Affirmation. The mind can conceive and causes itself to believe. We don't believe these things when we begin because we have another belief system, a negative, self-defeating belief system that must and time be changed. The only thing that will change a thought is what? A thought, another thought, a different thought, a better thought. The only thing that will change a feeling is what? A new and excited feeling. We have to practice being and having and knowing and believing and experiencing that we are spiritual beings reaching for a destiny that surpasses anything that we have conceived of prior to this great moment in our experience. Norman Vincent Peale, in his great book, Positive Imaging, points out that creative imaging consists of vividly picturing in your mind a desired goal or objective and holding that image until it sinks into your unconscious, where it releases great untapped energy. And Dr. Peale pointed out that the system works better when you believe in a power greater than yourself. Believe that you're connected with forces beyond yourself. And it works even better if you thank those forces in advance. And what did Jesus do? He said, I thank you now for what will be. There's no question but what it will be done. You have already heard me. It is accomplished. I believe it. And I will go my way acting as though it is done. We have a covenant, which means a contract that cannot be broken. My life can no longer be the way it was because I no longer am the way I was. What I now see is what I get. That's the way it really is.
To continue this presentation, please fast forward to the end and turn the tape over for proper cueing of side 2.